Craig, for joining and for your time. And we're excited to learn about metaverse. You have a beautiful, amazing solution with Verbela, which has been on the market for quite some time now. So you have collected so much experience at how it works in the company space, and with clients working with the platform now for some time. And so can't wait to hear this experience and sharing about it. And so for those who are joining, that session is part of what we call our GI Summit. And so we gather every year our affiliates and clients to discuss about the GI, what we are doing at Growth Resources. So in few words, very quickly, we help company grow and their leaders grow and their HR grow and the whole company grow thanks to some amazing information we can bring on people with what is typically called a personality survey. We don't like it to call it this way, but it's a quick and pretty amazing way to get very positive and nuanced information about people, unlike the market has been doing so far. And so we take that to companies through licensing and certifications and coaching so that the company can take it with our support to many applications in recruitment, coaching, leadership development, many other things. Okay? So that's what we have been doing for 10 years. Those people in the room you cannot see here are joining from different parts of the world. We are very excited to gather after 2 years of COVID. Our last meeting was on Zoom. Maybe next one, Craig, will be on Metaverse. We'll see. We'll see how it works.
We'll welcome you in the Metaverse. We'll welcome you all in the Metaverse.
But can't wait to show the experience of Metaverse to those who are here joining, in person or remote. I was amazed by your meeting, the meeting you organized. There were 500 people joining for a large presentation in the amphitheater, virtual amphitheater. It was so immersive. When you have this special vocabulary in the metaverse that you are slowly getting used to. So immersion is one of those words, keywords, and many others. This is why we're so intrigued by metaverse and what it can bring for leadership development, for teamwork, which is the subject of this session. We are not yet there for most of us. Technology since Second Life has evolved dramatically, and many more experience have been with that you had with your clients, and the small and very large. So we can't wait for you to explain about that and what you have been doing with them. And we're excited also to discuss how all of this metaverse makes sense for leadership development, for teamwork, for recruitment, for onboarding. And you have had some experiences also with your clients on that front. So can't wait to learn about it. So now to you, Craig. If you can introduce yourself, introduce your company, and we're going to continue this discussion back and forth. And I know you're going to share your screen and show us the metaverse. And so we have questions also at the end for those who are in the room here physically. So those who can ask questions on the chat. Okay, so raise your hand if you want to speak.
Hello, everybody. Frederick, excuse me for just a moment. You are controlling the view. Can you please switch it to gallery view at the moment?
Gallery view, yes. Okay, let's try to do it. Gallery view, where is that? This one. You see something different?
Yeah, I just changed it up. Did that work, Susan?
Well, everybody, I have it at gallery view, but the audience is saying they are seeing only one person with a strange black box at the bottom. Okay. And so I just want to have this cleared up before we present.
Okay, I changed to gallery. So do you see any difference here?
Everybody, can somebody tell us what you're seeing? We want to make sure that you're all seeing the gallery view, please, where you can see both speakers. No difference.
No difference. Okay. Well, Craig, all to you. So Susan, I didn't introduce Susan, but Susan is our head of marketing. And so She's here to make sure that things get on track, technology-wise, and also for the conversation. So if you have questions, you are able to post the questions, and Susan also will post to us, to Craig and to myself, or just interrupt the discussion so we get on track, and also with the timing. All good?
And we are set. Great. We're set with our view. I'm going to go ahead and mute myself, and I'm looking forward, Craig, to your presentation.
Thanks, Susan. Thanks for helping us get set up here and organize this wonderful event. Hi, everybody. I'm Craig Kaplan. All my friends and colleagues call me Cap, so feel free to do that. KAP. I know it's tough to say Craig, so we all say Cap instead. And I'm Chief Customer Officer for Bella. I've been with this team for 2 years. As you can imagine, with the pandemic, this was a very small startup, really building very specific applications for immersion for our clients. I'll talk a bit about that as well to give you kind of a sneak peek in some sort of the really amazing things we've done. With the pandemic, of course, hitting, there was just this massive influx of interest in the metaverse, but also just an incredible opportunity to really figure out how to adjust to this new world. And we ended up growing our team from 20 people to 150 people in about 12 months in order to support the new demand for the metaverse and their input. So it's been really exciting time for us, and a lot of changes and shifts in the market, as well as we've all experienced personally over the last 2 years of being remote, forced remote, and really seeing how the world has changed right in front of us, and how is that affecting organizations of all different sizes. And I'm so excited to share some of what I've learned and what we're doing in order to support organizations around the world.
Excellent, super. Well, we have all heard now about metaverse. I mean, since Facebook changed its name to Meta, people looked at it in a very different way now. It's like, oh, wow, such big companies switching to the metaverse fully, or maybe not fully, but so there's more and more people curious about what's happening up there. And you have seen some shift, dramatic shift for the last 6 months eventually, in your meetings, and people asking questions about what's going on as this metaverse, or getting curious. Did you see that shift happening recently since Facebook announced this change, or not?
Yeah, what the Facebook strategy really, in terms of just the name change on its own, really created a validation for the metaverse that was, I think, would have taken longer if it wasn't for that branding move by Mr. Zuckerberg. So by putting that front and center, it put a validation on the market. Now, all of the last 2 years, there's been some very serious conversations about the metaverse, and from not only from Facebook, but Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella has been talking about this as being the great disruption in the enterprise. And because he's, they've got this incredible focus on Microsoft Teams and collaboration applications, and that's focused. I think he's really been at the forefront of enterprise metaverse conversations. Now, didn't get as much attention that Facebook got from making the big name change. So kudos to Facebook for making the big change. Obviously, it might not be helping them right now in the market in terms of their stock price, but really said, this is what we're going to dominate. And I think it's important also to think about it as I think most people think about the metaverse from a consumer perspective. Right? What all the buzz going on around with NFTs, cryptocurrency, Web3, and the enterprise sort of technologies around the metaverse have really, in my opinion, have kind of struggled, right, to get adoption. And I think that also turned on in a big way by force function because of the pandemic. But I think if you ask your audience kind of what do they think about the metaverse you know, where have they experienced the metaverse? It'd be really interesting to see kind of where they've experienced it. Has it been in vocational training, which has been sort of the traditional market for VR and AR? Have they experienced it in the gaming world or in the cryptocurrency NFT? What you want to give a poll of your audience there to see, or people online? Like, what was your first experience in the metaverse?
Okay, so I can see that we have a poll here showing. So with different questions here, which are looking forward, you know, at the metaverse for applications in leadership eventually. So it doesn't get to your exact question here.
Yeah.
But you know, if you see that online, please answer that poll. But to your point, Craig, and to your question, what you just spoke about. So there have been some changes with technology. So it looks like there is no changes on technology anymore. I mean, Second Life, you know, things have evolved. And so now apparently we can, so people go to Sandbox. This is just amazing what they get there on Sandbox. World Wide Web Land was created in 2020. In eventually 2 or 3 months, they were capable to bring a metaverse platform up there in such a little time. Just crazy. Yeah. And so technology is there. So it's not, eventually there are still some changes in technology, or I mean, you are going to show how it works in metaverse when you go there. You recently introduced a new design of the whole environment you are offering to your clients, which is just incredible. So there have been some technology changes, but not anymore, it looks like. No, I mean, can you speak a little bit about that? Because in the discussions on metaverse, there are a lot of techie who are really excited about all that's happening there. But from a technology standpoint, it looks like, you know, the tools are here to continue growing the metaverse at a much faster pace and inviting new actors to be there. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think traditionally, kind of the metaverse experts kind of think about the metaverse as this federated, universally connected world, and they think about it just like in the internet blew up in the 90s, which is like HTML created this common language for everybody connect online, and that really created the universal scale of the browser being able to talk to any web server. So a lot of metaverse experts kind of think about the metaverse that way. It's got to be connected. It's got to be easy to access. And I don't think it's going to develop that way personally, because I feel like there's too many differences in the experiences, and there's too many different purposes for the metaverse right now. And that sort of universality of access, I actually don't think is that important, because I think what's important are the use cases, the value of the metaverse and its technology. Is it creating value? And particularly, is it creating value for these communities in enterprise companies and organizations that have really the biggest challenges around remote work and hybrid work challenges? So when the technology is, I think, sometimes evolving in ways that I wouldn't necessarily think is very important to what we care about, which is the value that we bring to organizations that have big communities of employees that just feel disconnected, have are challenged with mental health challenges, with isolation, with siloing of their organization in a way that is very unique to what the pandemic caused over the last couple of years. And then guess what? Even though there's this huge benefit for people to be back in person, there's not the desire right there, not the full desire to go back. And just last week, Apple had announced that everybody's coming back into headquarters and offices 3 days a week. Like, doesn't matter what day it is, but you got to be there. We're going to force everybody back in to collaborate. It's ironic, right? Forced collaboration. Let's do that. And the Apple employees are revolting. They're making CNN in terms of their letters and back. And it's because this is not the work of the future, particularly for knowledge workers, for digital workers. We have to give them the flexibility. They have a taste of freedom, work-life balance, and the employers have to move towards what the employees need, not only because it's best for them to work in a happy way, but it's also best for a competitive advantage for the companies in recruiting and extending out the ability for them to connect and collaborate, and for innovation. So competitive innovation. Is Apple going to get more innovation by pushing all their employees into the office 3 days a week and forcing them to collaborate and be there? I think the organizational psychologists would argue that, you know, you're not going to get a very innovative environment where people are unhappy that they're there in the first place, right? But there's so much to unpack here. I don't know if I touched on exactly what we're looking at from a technology perspective, but we think about it particularly because we were launched by organizational psychologists. We think about it really in terms of the psychology of work. And not as much from a technologist perspective. And I think that's what's really benefited us to be prepared for this type of disruption in the world.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So before we dive into some examples, and we ask you to bring some, you have just amazing examples. So before we go there, I would like you to comment a little bit on the metaverse for consumers. I mean, we're hearing about 8 trillion market space, and we see people with new monetization, NFTs and so on. You were commenting before we started on that. There are different ways to consumerize, to pay online. There's a market there. I wanted eventually to acquire some land on Sandbox. I mean, the prices are rising dramatically every day, every week. So there's a market. So people are paying more attention also because they know they can make money up there in a very different way than it used to be. So, but this is a consumer market. So for organizations, we're on kind of slightly different space here. But before we get a dive into this organizational space, can you comment a little bit about what's happening in this consumer space where people buy clothing, so people are making some design for shoes or just amazing things. You go there and there's, oh wow, there's a huge market of people who are doing things in a different way than it used to happen even 1 year ago. And but we're in different space with organizations, but can you comment on what's happening there on the consumer space before we switch to the organizational space?
Well, there's I don't know if you or your attendees are familiar with Second Life. So Second Life was like the really successful metaverse deployment in the 90s. So this is not a new playbook, so to speak. Second Life is co-founder and CEO was actually at our hands-in conference or user conference that you attended. Thanks for joining that. And he's he said that it still has a $600 million annual revenue from digital asset transaction in Second Life, and that's a 20-year-old platform. So it's not necessarily a new concept. And when you look at gaming and the the $1 trillion market of gaming and digital assets and skins, right, that's been an incredibly lucrative revenue. So what I see there, a lot of it is just metaverse is just an immersive version of really what has already been working. And what's interesting though is someone having 3 kids, 2 of which are teenagers, the gaming market, which I'm not an expert in, but I'm an observer of, hasn't been really super successful in the metaverse because you get the value of gaming from a 2D screen and easy access, and the technology on the consumer side of headsets and Oculuses and Vives and those sorts of devices, it's just not quite there yet, right? It's like, and I kind of equate it to 3D televisions. Remember 3D televisions when they came out and you had the glasses that you would put on? How many 3D televisions are out there today, right? There's 0 unless they're in a museum somewhere, right? So in a lot of cases, the technology doesn't add enough extra value in order to create that big market surge. And what we're seeing, I think, right now on the consumer side, there's more value being provided because of more activities and more interesting sort of engagements, but not quite there yet because the headsets still, they sell 10, 15, 20 million headsets a year. That's a tiny market for the consumer market when it comes to 6 billion people using the internet and the billions of users. So there's still ways to go there, but then there's the NFT market, the cryptocurrency market. So I kind of separate those two. But with Microsoft buying Activision right, is they're playing on the consumer side, but they're also playing on the enterprise side. Facebook becoming Meta, right? The understanding that this is the next, web version is obviously they're placing big bets on that. And I think on the consumer side, it's digital assets, it's advertising. I think that's what Meta's big long-term play is that they have to figure out how to grow advertising revenue, because video is getting hit by TikTok and other competitors there. So lots of complexity on the NFT side, cryptocurrency side. I think it's a whole different conversation that I'll skip for the sake of time. And I think there's really interesting things, but I will mention, right, if you're watching Warren Buffett's shareholders meeting, what Warren Buffett said was, I don't invest because there's no tangible value of cryptocurrency. I don't think he said that about NFTs, but I'm assuming that he probably feels the same way about NFTs, but we'll see. But I think that's kind of Warren Buffett is looking at real assets and how does that impact the market and real financial currencies. And I think there's a lot to be seen there on the cryptocurrency side. The NFT side is super interesting, but it's compelling me to invest in old art versus digital art. At least I'm a bit of a contrarian investor by trade, but I'm thinking, all right, the Picassos and the Andy Warhols with finite amount of art out there is a better play because they'll become more popular. But that's just me, and I don't give official investment tips out online.
That's probably very wise. Yeah, there's so much happening and ups and downs. So we're at the crucial point now where things are really under the effect of new announcements that may be done tomorrow by another big company. So we'll see how things are evolving. So now let's take a dive into the organizational space, and maybe you can start sharing your screen. We spoke about sharing some examples of how Metaverse works for organizations, some real examples of how it's working today with real clients and doing a lot of things. So can you please explain and show these examples to our participants here, and just to get excited about what you have been doing with your clients, and provide some examples of eventually what can be next there.
Yeah, can everybody see our my shared screen online and in person there?
Well, we do, Susan, who is monitoring everything here. Everything is on track as far as the technology is concerned.
Yep,
Should.
I got the okay for
good. Yep. So we're good.
Wonderful. So we've landed in the metaverse, and one of the things that's unique about Virbella's approach is that we've created an immersive platform that doesn't require a headset, and so we're really kind of the bridge between 2D and 3D. We're basically a game that provides the benefits of virtual reality, but with the ease of access through it, so that you can just launch it on your desktop or laptop and not have to invest in a $300, $400 headset. And so that's a very different sort of design structure here. I've landed what we call Open Campus. So this is actually a campus that anybody can download in the world. This is really a public playground in the metaverse. And so it's unique. It's similar to like if you landed in Decentraland or the Sandbox, in the sense that you can, meet anybody there. And this is really designed to be a campus environment, and a place where you can feel like it really a sense of being a university campus or an expansive corporate campus. And the goal here is to be really a professional environment for engagement. Second Life, if anybody remembers being in Second Life, turned into sort of a fantasy land, kind of an escapism space. And it went and had its life of its own. And I guess, when you call it Second Life, that's, what they were trying to accomplish is really kind of separating themselves. We really see this to be the sort of the LinkedIn of the metaverse, in that sense of where you have a really professional engagement, professional meetings, and we've created it based on our organizational psychology co-founders. Really 10 years ago, they wanted to go and they had a theory that learning online was really not providing type of value, because of course in-person learning you do connect with each other, with your teachers and with mentors more effectively. So here's a bit of our history, and you can see 2010, there's Alex Howland working on his PhD research project. He launched this in order to really address that hypothesis that if you brought people in to an immersive environment, would that really support learning in the way that learning in person? Would that help people connect with each other in the same way that if you brought them into a university campus or into a corporate campus to learn? So this is the beginning, and then you could see where the pandemic hit, and then it really drove adoption into trying to solve, how do we're on video conferencing all day in the last 2 years. How do you solve this connection to people that is more than just structured meetings? And that's the key thing here, is that what's missing from our lives when it comes to the people we work with is that we're missing unstructured social engagement, unstructured or serendipitous. A lot of it we were calling water cooler conversations. Well, nobody actually misses the water cooler conversations unless you're kind of the office gossip. But what you do miss is the presence of seeing people in the office, connecting with people, not about work, right? Having side conversations that help you learn about what people are working on. It's that serendipitous connections. And this is what this type of campus environment plugs into. I'll take a breath there, Frederic, if you have any comments or questions before I step in and go into a actively working metaverse office. One of the few in the world is the entire team. My team actually works in the office 5 days a week, and I'll drop in and give you a tour of what we're doing here in the metaverse office place.
So yeah, I mean, if you can comment on the screens you are showing here, these are screens that, like now, we're sharing your screen, and so you can share your screen on those walls. Right? This is something that's where you can have slides and display the slides. So that's how it works, no? Doesn't it?
That's exactly right. These are browser boards, so they work just like your browser, on your desktop. And so I can go in and turn on desktop share down here. You can see the tool in the bottom right corner for presenting. And so I've got bookmarks, and I can pull up other content. I can turn on my webcam. So if I wanted to put my live stream up on this board. Now, I'm in the public area of campus, so we don't change things out here because it's designed to have certain content right for the experience. But I'll show you some of these things as we jump into other experiences.
I have a question that's come in. Is this a good time for that?
Sure.
Yes, please, just so.
All right. So Susan asks, managing the dark web is a challenge that social media hasn't solved. How does that work in the metaverse and the open campus? Are there moderators, or what happens there?
That's a great question. So lots of discussions about safety and security and privacy, right, in the metaverse, because those are all top of mind for problems in the internet. So how is this going to be worse? Is it going to be better in the metaverse? I'm not necessarily optimistic that the metaverse is going to solve problems that we haven't solved, in social media, on the internet. There's a lot of organizations and people trying to get ahead of that, including people from our own team who are looking at this. One of the things, the way we solve it, is that this is our only public campus. This is not our approach is not to actually deploy big public campuses like Decentraland and Sandbox is doing, and what Meta is doing with Horizons. So they have the challenges that they face on their own social media platforms. They essentially have to figure out in new technologies. I'm not sure how much faith we have in those companies to do that, unfortunately. The way we're solving it, though, I think is that we're creating private campuses. So this campus, we replicate this campus and we've deployed it to PwC. We've deployed a replication of this campus to Deloitte. We've deployed to a national bank in Canada, to Fujitsu, to LG Electronics. And so it ties into single sign-on. So our data security is very robust. Our security and permissions are robust. And even we're not recording any information either, or saving any information. It's desktop shares, images. So even the amount of content that's being put up there is minimal. So we don't have a trolling issue, within Virbela, as you would imagine. And we work very closely with the Women in XR organization, which is a fantastic organization. And there's lots of conversations and panels about, sexual harassment within the metaverse, because that is already happening, unfortunately. And what happens, of course, is when you're not anonymous, a lot of these things go away very, very quickly, and kind of part of the approach, right? If I'm coming in and you see Craig Kaplan on the screen and my known email address, and it's not some sort of fake email, things are definitely more professional, and that's what we've seen. I have known only one issue of trolling within our private campuses. That's why we call them private campuses. It was an intern who was working within an organization, a very big organization. They changed some content on one of our web boards because they had access to changing content, and they put something rude up on the web board. And what happened was the client reached out to us and said, "Hey, do you have a record of who changed that content?" And we said, "We sure do. Here's the name of the person who changed the content." And that intern had sat down and had a talking to, I imagine. I'm also imagining that he didn't get a job there after his internship ended. So very different kind of approach. We don't have the sort of challenges that a lot of these other folks have. But it's a fantastic question and something that's on our mind. But I think that's one of the reasons why it's easier to deploy us, in these companies, because they don't have to have the concerns of, let me bring my employees into Decentraland and then have no idea who they're interacting with or what's happening. And so it's our approach, I think, is providing that safe place for employee interactions that is actually safer than in real life. Right? Because there's no sexual harassment from a physical. There could be sexual harassment from a verbal approach, right, in the metaverse. But we're actually eliminating some of the challenges in the workplace while trying to keep the best aspects of it in terms of being able to connect people at scale across global regions. You could tell I could talk about this for forever, because it's such an interesting topic. What I can also show you is, these areas I'm showing you right now is they're private areas. So one of the benefits of this immersive space is that the audio has really unique sort of functionality within our application, 3D spatialized audio. So I can turn on my mic here in the bottom left corner and talk. If I do, it's going to cause an echo because of the Zoom meeting, but I'll try it real quick to see if it causes any echo. So now you can see I have a talk bubble. So I'm talking in the application. If anybody was near me in this space, they'd be able to hear me talking. And if I ran away from them, they wouldn't be able to hear me talk. So really, really kind of real world audio. Hello. Oh, somebody came over, heard me talking. Hey, Diraj, how are you?
I'm fine.
I'm doing a web tour right now on video, so I can't hang out on chat, but take a look around and enjoy yourself.
Okay, thank you. Got it.
You're welcome. So there's a serendipitous metaverse experience right there. I don't know who Diraj is, because again, this is our public campus. So, but he heard me talking, obviously wanted to come in and be social, and people gravitate to connecting with other people. In fact, if you look down in our messaging system, we have sort of a public chat, and then you can individually message. And so I ran into this person when our conversation started, and she started chatting with me, asking me questions or first experience of Virbela. So there's multiple modes to kind of communicate in comfortably in these spaces, whether it's through public chat or go talk to people or individually message, and it just creates this sort of connectivity. So she was asking me all the kind of the questions we always get, you know, about why, whether you need a headset or not use a headset. So we could go find it. She's actually, I can see she's up here, and I could send her a private chat, just because in the metaverse space, one of these big advantages is I can see my community. I know who is present. And even though I might not know who Argivan is, I see that she's present, she's messaging me, and I could go have conversations with. I can see Frederick is here as well. Frederick is in the space as well somewhere. I could go to and find Frederick by navigating functionality there. So really exciting ways to connect and be present. That's what's so key about this kind of challenge, is like when you're on in an organization and all of your calls are scheduled, and maybe you have a Slack system, you know, where you can message people, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you feel present with them. And that's really the big value we're here. And then I can jump in.
Craig, excuse me to interrupt. In which room are you now?
I'm over in the product room. We call it the product center on this campus. You could obviously call it whatever you want, but I can come find you.
Okay, so this is a product center, you call it?
Yeah, or... it's a. Let me go to you. I'll
yeah, I am in a different room. I am. Well, I can go on the.
I'm running after you.
Okay, good. Thank you.
One of the other features of the metaverse is that if you're, I could come and find you just by hitting the go-to function. There you are.
I see you coming. Yeah, there you are.
Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you, Craig. Yeah.
I could,
I don't have a bun. For those who can see me, I don't have a bun, but this is how I decided to.
You're looking hip. You're looking like.
Yeah, I can follow you. Can you take us to the tour in the campus? I mean, I'm going to follow you now.
Yeah, let's take a walk around. So if you hit shift, use your arrow keys.
Oh yeah, the shift. Yeah, this is something I learned.
This is the way I beat everybody in the races, right? So I'm gonna run through the campus and give it kind of a.
Yeah, you're running faster than I do. Oh shit! Yeah. Oh.
I'm also. So you can see, like, every campus is
oh my God,
an island.
Yeah, that's agile. You know, I haven't been playing like kids, you know, on those games as much. And so,
yeah, you don't have fast fingers like my kids. The keyboards are breaking because they're hitting so hard. There you are. We found you, and running into Jeremy here.
Okay, hey, hi Jeremy. Yeah, I can speak to Jeremy.
Yeah, if you turn your mic on, we can talk to Jeremy. It looks like he's turning around. Hey Jeremy, how are you? If you turn your mic on, bottom left corner, we can chat. And here's Diraj again. Hey Diraj.
Oh, Jeremy is here. This is our Jeremy. Hi Jeremy.
Yeah.
Oh shit! No, I went too far.
You walked past him. There's Diraj. Good to see you guys. We're doing a video tour for a bunch of people out of Sonoma. So we're gonna keep going, but good to see you both, and feel free to explore.
Yeah, Jeremy escaped. Oh my God, Jeremy. Yes, there you are.
All right. Well, we're gonna run in. Let's run into the auditorium. We'll show you a big space.
Okay.
So I'm gonna run and drop in the auditorium. Now this is a template, this campus, so we could plug in almost an infinite amount of scenes. So this is a scene. And so when we create a campus like this, it's essentially a template, but we can create a bunch of different scenes by attaching them. So the campus itself is kind of a set scene. And when I go to our go-to menu, this open campus that anybody on the call here can download, go to virbela.com, you can download it, you can explore and run into us. But it's a multi-purpose campus. So it's a place for a public square, so to speak, for the metaverse, for people just to use and engage and socialize and just to tour. It's also a place where you know, we set it up as a demo place for people to explore the different types of scenes, or office suites, or auditoriums, or conference hall, or expo hall. You can jump to the different campus locations and really see kind of the different environments. We have a beach. We have a game called the Invisible Bath game, which is like a challenger course. It's not in a bath. That's just me fumbling over my words today. There's the soccer field or basketball courts, depending on how we set things up. There's what we call the environment, the Speakeasy, which is our nightclub. So you have a nightclub environment for having fun, social engagement. So really common experiences. But we also, after we step out of the auditorium, we'll jump into Virbela offices. So here, because I'm a leader of the team, I get access to all of the Virbela office floors. But Frederick could probably only see our main office floor, because from a permission standpoint, we can give permissions based on IDs, and so all of our team members get more access to other floors. And so, but for the public, they can only access our main office floor, where our sales team and some of our customer success folks work out of. But we'll jump into the office in a second. I wanted to show the auditorium because there's some really unique aspects of doing virtualized meetings. Now, we had a sales kickoff in this environment from a company called DXC. You might remember it as HP Consulting. They're a big user of our platform. They had 1,000 of their salespeople in Europe in this sales kickoff in January. Their CEO came in, and you know, you wouldn't imagine that executives are jumping into these sorts of things. But he came in and said, this is not about digital transformation. This is about cultural transformation. The platform itself drives innovation. And what Mike Salvino, the CEO of DXC, has been talking about with the rebranding is like, you know, we want people to think about us not as an old technology company, but as a new technology company. And you can imagine the impact this has when on social media, if you look at DXC Virtual World on hashtag DXC Virtual World on LinkedIn, you'll see what it's doing. It's exciting his team. It's something innovative to engage in. And this is the first time I've worked in a technology company, and I've been doing this for 25 years, where our clients actually create videos of excitement about their campuses. It's a place, it's a destination, and they create videos to excite their own teams, to bring them in, to engage them socially and for events. So it's really, really incredible. But here we are in the auditorium. You can see I have my presenter tool up. And so I can create, you know, webcam, share my webcam. It's not going to share because I'm on Zoom and my webcam is being used right now. So I can't do that, but I can do a desktop share my screen and bring up something like this. And it's going to present there. And then I can turn around and show that, you know, what's up on the boards here. If from the room, you know, every seat's good in this 2,000 person auditorium. And by the way, there's nobody in the world that can do this at this scale. So we can have live faces on the screens to do a round table. You can really just get a huge number of people in one place. And you can imagine when you're sitting in the audience looking at Frederick and Jeremy down there, it's a different way of connecting. Our audience on Zoom right now, I can get chats and so forth. You know, you just don't see each other. You don't have that sense of presence and connection. And that's really the psychology of this that's really incredible. As somebody who's worked in the metaverse for 2 years, I really connected to the people I work next to, even though I've not met 90% of them because we hired 100 people in the pandemic. And so I've met a lot of them, but really only about 10% of the team as I've met but I get to know them and connect because of that sense of presence and connection. The other thing that's really fun, and I'll get to the question in the chat, which is a really good question, is there's a lot of fun to be able to get into changing the dynamic of the scene, the spaces itself. The virtual immersion world allows us to do some really fun things. So if I want, what I'll do is I'll retract the chairs. This is a bit too big of an environment. And, there's only, 3 of us in here. So let me make it a little bit more cozy and make people feel like it's easier to connect with. This happens in our virtual spaces. So I was doing a team meeting. I have about 30 people on my team, and we were experimenting with different spaces. And I was in an auditorium-like space like this and having a conversation. What was happening psychologically, they felt more like the audience versus people connecting with me and collaborating. That wasn't the goal. So I moved my meetings every Monday with these 30, 40 people into a smaller scene. And what happened? People felt more psychologically comfortable to have conversations. Even if I was asking people to talk in those meetings, they were being more introverted and more reserved because the space felt big. And that's the interesting psychological part of it. So by creating smaller spaces, right, there's a different sort of feeling now in this room, right? Other than the trash compactor feeling when I'm doing it, the Star Wars scene. But once we stop this trash compactor, this is a different environment psychologically. It's a different way to connect. Even though I'm on stage, I can address the audience, and the audience is going to feel different in this type of environment. So
Craig,
shifted
yeah, excuse me to interrupt here. So a question for you. You are speaking about the psychological setup or environments, and that's something I experienced myself when I connected to the metaverse, to Verbela platform the first time, which is, it's like, it's a different experience than Zoom. So people have been experiencing Zoom. They've been experiencing in-person meetings. It looks like what we have here provides a very different experience from a psychological standpoint. It reminds me when I was giving phone calls to people, plus we have this 3D immersion experience to it. Because you don't see the person, you don't see how they look like, you don't see their age, you don't see their gender. You can guess through the tone of the voice who the person is, which it's not biased by how people look like. So I'm sure you have been having some discussion about that at Verbela. How that experience, this immersive experience, is different. We are seeing here myself and Jeremy, my co-founder, who is going around here. We have some persona who are very close to who we are. Sometimes we are not. So a very different psychological experience. Can you comment about that? The voice aspect, the visual aspect of the person. It's different than what we know has happened on Zoom, has happened on the phone. It's something different. And unless you have experienced it, it's just hard to explain.
You're absolutely spot on, Frederick, as usual. Your analysis on this. We struggle ourselves trying to explain this in our messaging, right? There's a different type of connection that's happening, and the barrier to entry is that sort of like a cartoon look of the avatar, right? And so kind of the initial instinct is like, this is sort of fake. What's actually more interesting is, and we see this in our real life, because we're using this every single day. I commute to work by launching my application and landing in campus and talking to people that are there, and then going to these offices here. But it does actually create a more human connection. That's the real kind of non-intuitive part of this. Our co-founder, Sheldon Brown, and another academic from UC San Diego, just like Alex Howland, who's in organizational psychology. Sheldon Brown launched the Center for Human Design in UC San Diego in the 90s, the blending of human connection with design. He's one of the preeminent experts in this kind of concept of how to connect human-centric design in the metaverse and digital spaces. And we have fantastic academic debates about these things, because a lot of metaverse technologies are going to more real life, kind of like photographic, images. And our approach is that we don't want things to look too real, because based on Susan's question, if you look too real, it actually has started to have the Zoom effects, the Zoom dysmorphia, Zoom fatigue. And those are caused, and I shouldn't say Zoom, it's video dysmorphia, video fatigue, which is the effect of being on broadcast where you start to feel very self-conscious about the way that you look. And introverts feel even more self-conscious on video than they do in real life, which is the other studies that have been shown that, oh, introverts should love remote work because they don't have to be in the office. Well, turns out it's worse for introverts because being on video kind of points out, you know, that self-consciousness in a bigger way. So there's some really interesting psychology to this, but what we're trying to do is continue to modernize our avatar, make them look more and more modern, more diversity, but not make them look exact replicas. And to Susan's question, you know, when you look around in our offices, and I can say this after 2 years, and almost everybody does choose their avatar that looks like them. And because they are representing themselves in a professional environment. So very rarely do we see folks come in and choose a different avatar to become something else, because this isn't Second Life. This is your professional experience. So it's really interesting to see. Now, it's not like we come in and say, hey, you have to choose an avatar that looks like yourself, right? People come in and they choose whatever they want to choose, but they do gravitate towards choosing their avatar looks like them, just the way that, you know, I think, again, it's similar to LinkedIn, right? LinkedIn, people put their professional pictures up there. It's a different approach than on Facebook, where you're doing funny and zany and different things and posting about your political causes or whatever's going on Facebook these days. But on LinkedIn, right, it's about your you know, your professional perception. So what, oh, looks like Frederick, Jeremy's shaking hands with you. You got to press F3 to
yeah, how
so
we
not,
do that?
not
Jeremy,
leave him hanging.
yeah,
F3.
I don't know how to shake hands with Jeremy.
Do you have F3 at the top of your
Oh,
keyboard?
F3. No, I don't have it.
Yes. Oh,
So
Jeremy's
you're
thinking now.
comfortable.
Jeremy's our emoji or emotive guy. All right.
One,
So
two,
the couple,
three, I don't know. I don't see it.
yeah, maybe, or you might be on a Mac.
I am on the Mac. That's right. I don't have F3 on
You
my
have
keyboard,
to.
so it
I've
must be
got
done.
to. Yeah, that you Mac people always get different ways to do things.
That's right.
So you can see some really, you know, different ways to express emotion and sort of excitement, but also what we see is the public chat becomes a really big way to do that. Hey Blair, how are you?
Hey, pretty good. How are you?
Good to see you. Giving a bit of a tour with the crew here and showing folks around, introducing them to the team.
Nice. Welcome in.
Thank you. Good to see you. I saw your note about registering for shareholders meeting. Thanks for having a reminder on that.
Yeah,
Keeping
no
us in line.
problem. No problem at all.
Appreciate
Yeah,
that.
feel free to reach out with any questions. But I'll talk to you soon. Have a good tour.
Thanks, Blair. See you later.
See ya.
So what's great, right, is I set up in my office right here, and really it's kind of a strategic location I've chosen to sit at the landing zone of this main floor, because when I sit down, and you can see I can personalize my office. I can give my office space a different feel than my home office space, which is like we were saying before, is the mix between the music room and my office, my kids' music room. But in my office, I come in here and I can have content set up, and I sit in this space and I look out the window, and that's my way to see who's coming in and out of the office. Not because I'm trying to micromanage it, because I want to feel connected to who's coming and going. And then when we sit here, and oftentimes people will come to my door because they have a question. They could Slack me or message me, but it's more engaging, right, to come up and have that conversation versus that asynchronous message. So if they want to have a synchronous conversation versus just a quick question, they come by and they'll peer into my window, just like when I used to work at Verizon and had 50 people in cubicles, and they'd come to the door and knock on the window and say, hey, I need you or something. And it just recreates that sort of engagement that you don't always have. You also notice I can see my whole team up here in the top left corner. So everybody who's in this floor Alyssa's on my sales team. Blair, we just talked to, is a marketing team for our parent company who's coming to visit. Brian is on our sales team. Caitlin is on marketing. Mark is sales. Marco's our VP of marketing. Maya is our PR director. Mira is our sales. Rachel is our social media. So this is our sales and marketing floor typically. But I have that sense of connection that they're there in a different way than seeing their name listed on a Slack. I have Slack up right now and they're listed there, but I don't feel as connected just because they're on Slack. I know Slack is just a messaging system. I know that these folks are present in the office and I could go by and run into them or chat with them. It's a very different sort of psychological feel.
So Craig, if you want to meet with those people, what do you do? So you just call them here or you invite them in the room, or how does it work?
A couple different things. The quickest thing to do is oftentimes they'll just drop in because they all have their offices in here, right? So if I want to go see somebody, right, I'll go. And you can notice people have changed their office names for teams to interview. You also know we have an interview room. So we do our recruiting here in the metaverse, and that also puts people more comfortable in the most stressful situation, right? An interview situation. And when they're in an avatar, they can really feel more like themselves. It doesn't matter what they look like, what their hair looks like, because we don't care in the metaverse. That's the other piece, I think, to Susan's question in the chat, is that because you're not a photograph, people don't put any real weight into what you look like and what your appearance is, because it doesn't matter. Not because it could be different than real life, it's just because it's just an avatar representation of the person behind it. So the interview processes are very interesting. People not only is showing innovation, like imagine interviewing in the metaverse. Like, do you think that company's innovative if they're doing all their interviews in the metaverse? Right? The front door to your organization, your recruiting department, showing folks to use the metaverse as a way to interview and do it fairly, without bias, and in an interactive way where you can bring people from all parts of the company together in this way. That shows innovation is a competitive advantage. And we've seen a lot of really fantastic recruiting events and activities because this is basically showing that our technology is better than everybody else's in the recruiting space.
So Craig, for candidates, so how does it work with candidates? So we're speaking of onboarding or the first interviews with candidates. So candidates are invited for the interview on the metaverse in your space in one office. So they have to download the app. As you said, it's pretty quick. Technology-wise, it's pretty straightforward. And so you invite them to do that, then meet in the room. They have to learn fast. I mean, the adoption is pretty quick. So even if they have never been there, they can do it. Or how does it work exactly? Have you seen some friction for those situations or not?
So for us, right, we're fully adopted. So we're at a different stage of work in the metaverse than our clients are. Most of our clients, our parent company EXP is a 80,000 agent real estate organization. They're not a technology company, but they were the CEO there was challenged with the 2007 real estate crash and mortgage crisis. His business was basically going out of business, and he said, you know what, I could run this business but at a lower budget, lower operating costs. And he was a fan of metaverse technologies, and he found Virbela, and we were really the only solution that was scalable, that wasn't built around VR headsets. Because when you build to VR headsets, your capacity and performance is restrained because you're trying to do all the VR functionality. And so he started to use us in his company at EXP when they had less than 1,000 agents. You fast forward 6 years, they have 80,000 agents and have expanded into 20 countries outside of the US without any offices, without getting on airplanes. They use this as a centralized recruiting platform to bring agents in from around the world. And what it does, it also creates a common culture, a connection back to the leadership team between each other. You can imagine, agents are just independent operators or franchises, or they just are, independent entrepreneurs essentially in the real estate business. But EXP has been voted the best place to work 5 years in a row by their employees and by their agents, because they feel a common connection to the company because they're in the same place when they're operating, when they're learning, when they're onboarding, and they can connect people. So if you were watching Stephen Colbert a month or two ago, there was a story they did because it was picked up by the New York Times and others about two of our agents that met in Virbela. They would have not connected in person in that way through a certification real estate licensing class. And fast forward 2 years later, they got married in Virbela. Well, they did a real wedding ceremony, but we replicated the ceremony in Virbela while they were getting married so that people who weren't present could experience it there too. And then Stephen Colbert did a bit about it on his show a few weeks ago, making fun of it, of course. But it was really an incredible experience. You don't get relationships and connections like that in that way from video conferencing. You don't get that sort of socializing, that personal connection. And that was just a really great example that people could meet each other and continue to have friendships within the space that you just don't develop. And ultimately these two fell in love, which is incredible. But the adoption is not difficult in the sense of technology, but in the sense that when we deploy to an organization, we typically have to get through the IT teams, right? GDPR requirements and security and all of that. But when they deploy it, they push out our application to their end users, to the employees, and it appears on their desktop. We create like a very special launch event, usually for those employees with that team, to bring them in. And we'll take them into something like this, where we'll create an event, what we call a community experiences area.
Is that correct? We cannot hear you. Hello? You can see your screen. Oh,
yeah,
you're back.
At the moment.
Oh,
there we are. We cannot hear you, Craig.
We cannot hear you, Craig. Craig, we cannot hear you. Oh, there you are back.
Oh, did I get cut out?
Yeah,
my internet cut out a bit.
50 seconds, which helped me to ask a question. So these spaces you are inviting people into, they are branded for the company. We see Volvo here, we saw KPMG. So I'm sure you have a function somewhere in the platform where you brand, you bring the logo, you bring the name of the company. So when we're speaking about immersive experience, this is immersive in the space of the company you are joining, I guess.
Yeah, we are. Well, this is our sales floor. So the sales team is very excited about quickly branding the space for the demos that they're doing as we tour people, through the spaces. And so that's how easy it is to kind of personalize. And so like when we bring Volvo in, which must have come through in a demo recently, KPMG, we actually had a call with their team yesterday. And so the team is just like, right click the wall and bring in the image. And now you can see that this could be a very personalized space. When we deploy for an organization, we're really deploying for employee experiences, the entire employee experiences life cycle. And so when a department or whole organization deploys, we really think about, well, this is a persistent community that really gives you the ability to drive culture. And how is culture driven? It's driven by individuals on the team interacting with each other, right? Culture is not created top down. Culture is created because of the individuals, the employees working with each other, creating relationships and being on the same mission, having the same common mission for the organization. And so when we come into it, we help a client build a community like this, it's about, right, what are the values of your organization, and like, how do we pass it on into an immersive space? And so we'll have executives and employees create videos, right, to put up on campus. And then when we typically launch a campus, we do like a very fun scavenger hunt. Like, let's learn all the values and missions of the organization. And if you complete the scavenger hunt, seeing the different videos and seeing different presentations, you win prizes and you give away an Oculus or do something like that. And the scavenger hunt is a great way to get motion activity, kind of get the avatars moving, creating buddy systems and teams. And it's so important from this kind of new way of working that we're connecting people together intentionally, right? Not just the people that you're working with, but people across teams and across regions, geographically connecting people differently to bring up innovation. So one of these concepts is right here. This is using a kind of a space that this month, in honor of mental health awareness, created what's called a mind gym. The scene itself is basically from one of our pre-designed scenes, but you can see there's kind of music playing as we get closer to different spaces. There's different sort of messaging here about brain fitness. And what we're doing is actually creating a place for teams to go into and have a mind gym experience. And individuals can come back and use this as a break. And so you can see here's a section on brain training for focus and performance. You can see on this section is around stretching, the neuroplasticity, right? Especially as we get older, neuroplasticity is really about learning new things. And then of course, continuing to keep that mind working, new connections, which is, I've read is one of the best things in order to kind of stave off those scary Alzheimer's and diseases, is neuroplasticity, keeping the mind learning new things. So you step into these spaces and you can do, the videos can come up. We've curated this experience and given different sort of a different content, and you can see it just really fun, but also educational parts of the experience. And we're really teaching our enterprise clients that the space is really about melding scenes, people, and content together. The future of work is not just metaverse, but it's really immersive, interactive museums. If you could work out of the San Francisco MoMA every day, right, with the inspiration around you of fine art, modern art, what does that do for your collaborations, for your engagements, for the creativity? And what these campuses do is they actually allow you to create your own interactive museums in order to present the content in an engaging way, as well as in a social way. So you can think about the future is every innovation center from every company in the world is just recreated, as the workplace itself. You don't have to create an innovation center to bring clients in. You create an innovation center for your entire organization to work out of. And that's really what's exciting and inspiring about, I think, the work that we're doing.
Exciting, very impressive. Craig, we have a question here about non-verbal language. So we know this is important, non-verbal language. So how do we deal with that in the metaverse? I mean, do we need it? Do we don't need it anymore? Or how does it work? How does it play?
I think it's still very, very important. And I think we're going to need to address it more and more in terms of functionality. And so the way we're addressing it right now, which I think is still effective, is through a lot through what's happening in the chat. So when we have team meetings and folks aren't being verbal, they're showing emotion in the chat, and that's how our team has done it just naturally. And again, I'm in the metaverse, right? 8-10 hours a day, so that's very natural that folks might not want to talk. We can't see their faces, but they're putting in heart emojis and thumbs up, and they're chatting. And so that's sort of the meta information that we're getting on emotions. We also have folks who are very quick with their shortcut keys to do things like clap or excitement or thinking. And I think there's still, I think the advancement of technology will help that tremendously, especially as we get into more lightweight headsets in the next couple of years that are reflecting emotion. I think it's going to be very much, you'll get that emotion through the avatar face and so forth. The technology is already there, but it's not there to do it at scale. You can't bring 2,000 people on a headset into an auditorium or even in like even MetaZone technology, I think their capacity is 15 people in a meeting room. So you can't do things that are really advanced technologically at scale yet, but the technology is there. It's just a matter of how do we end up plugging it into this environment. It's still very important, but it hasn't. But I think the value of what the immersive space brings, because of the value that it brings, it's so different than video conferencing. Long term is there, and you know, we don't necessarily see the negatives of not being able to see the emotions on the face, right? And by the way, when we talk to a lot of organizations, right, what happens when you get more than a few people on a video conference? You know, the video goes off, right? You know, people just turn it off anyway. So you're not seeing people's faces in a lot of these video conferences, or there's too many people on these video conferencing, and so you just don't see people at all anyway, because there's just too many people, so you don't get that sense of presence anyway. So I don't think it's as big of an issue when you're comparing it to video conferencing anyway, for that reason. But there'll be, stay tuned, there'll be that sort of facial expression changes, but it won't happen until there's lightweight enough headsets to make it easy to get people and scale into these environments. So we're a couple of years down, I think, the road on that stuff. And then the adoption of Google Glass or whatever, based on privacy issues, who owns the data, I think it's still going to be a challenge in the enterprise environment to get that sort of adoption, because of challenges around those companies and the real sort of really interest in having first person data, right, to drive you know, ad spend and so forth.
So that's a really interesting topic here. I know you signed some agreements with Zoom, so when you are in meeting rooms, you can share. So with Zoom, kind of have a Zoom experience, but on 3D space, immersive space. So this is how it's going to work, or eventually not. But I'm asking this question because eventually we don't want to see people. Maybe it's better not to seeing them. I mean, I remember in the conference you had 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago, people don't want to show, you know, their color, skin color, or they don't want to show their age. They don't want to show their gender. They just don't want the Zoom experience anymore. And so they are much better with the metaverse than, and not showing, and just showing their voice. So it gets very much to our point also with the GI, because we know there are a lot of biases. We intuit people when we see them, eventually in a way which is not favorable to the experience, to the relationship. And so removing that component may be beneficial. We'll see. And that, you know, how we do it, you know, with the GI, with this symbolic feature, you may have seen also for you, Craig, and those who know the GI know about it. So it brings some different experience of who people are, how they interact, how they make decisions, how they learn. And we don't need this visual component eventually. So maybe just scrapping Zoom may be the future. No, I mean, where is it going? To your opinion, what do you see happening? Those clients of yours, do they invite people to share, you know, their visual appearance or not at some point? Does it make any sense? Is it, you know, needed, beneficial?
I think it's super interesting question, and I don't have the answer for you. I think that what ends up, I think though, from my perspective, it really comes down to, you know, what the interaction's for, right? Why are you there, and what's the purpose, the use case for, you know, you being in that sort of environment. So when we think about kind of meeting spaces, you know, we have a technology platform just for taking video conferencing to the next sort of level, and that's a product called Frame VR, which I haven't demoed. And it is something about meetings where, you know, video conferencing is really just a tool that works really well, right? It does, you know, it's great for conversations between you and me, and for me sharing to a bunch of silent folks, you know, attending, or, you know, or asking questions, but that's really what it's great for. Meetings can be so incredible that, you know, what if we met, you know, in an environment that was set up with all the GRI content around, right, with all the presentations already set up, and we could walk from one meeting space to another to have again, a museum-like experience. So I think whether you want to show your face or doesn't show your face, is kind of similar to sort of online behavior. You know, what are people's intentions? What are they trying to do? I think it's really interesting when you look at sort of, you know, recruiting and dating, you know, online, where there's actually new dating apps where it's not about, you know, your appearance. It's about, you know, these questions and deep sort of analysis, kind of going back to the eHarmony days. Used to be a client of mine 20 years ago, was really deep sort of psychological questions about connection, and had nothing to do with, you know, appearances. And then we went to the, you know, to the Tinder approach, you know, and it's starting to swing back, you know, the other way. So I think there's trends here about personal appearance that are really super interesting. Obviously a lot more complicated this decade than it ever has been before, with all different gender identity issues and the political aspect of things, that it's really, it's a minefield, right, for enterprise companies right now to deal with. And frankly, being an avatar form kind of eliminates a lot of the risk and the challenges and the problems around what might be perceived bias, you know, even if it's not there. It just mitigates that, right? Because it's no longer a place where you can, where it comes into play. So I think the benefits of this type of environment and being behind the avatar face, as long as it's a secure place, private place, where it's a, you know, where you have the identities known, that combination of engagement, I think, is really super interesting. And frankly, I think that not enough people are looking at it in that way, because the big money is in the consumer products right now, and the gaming and the NFTs and cryptos. We literally have no competition in the employee experiences space. There's a company called GatherTown, which is done very well and raised a lot of money from Sequoia. What it is a map on your computer, and then you go and walk to people in their office, and you could click the video conference with them. And it's great as a tool. As Slack, like if Slack did a map on Slack, then they would be the same thing. And so they might have some challenges if they're you know, if functionality like that hits Slack. But I think it's you know, people aren't thinking about employee experiences in the psychological way. Even though, you know, every company, big company in the world, is trying to figure out how to create better collaboration and innovation. It's just they're not necessarily seeing the metaverse is the way to do it. And I think we're onto something that's not only unique, but also incredibly powerful, you know, from adoption. But what you were saying, Frederick, earlier, is like, people's concept of this just doesn't, it's just not that realization that happens that after you've spent a month in a metaverse office with your team, and you're really excited about these benefits, then it sort of turns on. The realization of it really is incredible.
So you see some benefits for, we have a question about from Christina about the sense of community. So you see that sense of community building in the metaverse in a very similar fashion or differently than when it was done in person? And people belong to the community, or there's this sense of the immersion is really interesting. I mean, when you are there, you remember it in a very different way than when you remember a Zoom or, you know, in-person meeting. Does it participate in building the community, the relationship within the community? Do you see that happening with your clients?
100%, no doubt. And I think ultimately what you can't force people into a community, right? And that's where you go wrong. Community develops, right, by the interactions and the desire to be there. What's nice about enterprises is that they have a commonality, right? The commonality of being on the same mission to you know, to build great search engines or build great ad tech or do whatever is the mission for the company. And so there's a built-in community, right, in our organizations. And then the question becomes, how do we enable those communities in a much stronger way? How do we remove obstacles to the community building, which now there's huge obstacles to community building because pandemic requirements and the desire not to travel, the desire not to go into the office. So now there's even bigger barriers to building community than before. But what's interesting is that community building in the metaverse is actually really easy. You just have to create reasons to be there. And so we've helped our clients do that by creating like the Mind Gym, by creating the Black History Library, by creating the virtual center. We realized this after about a year of deploying to big companies. Like they were doing events like recruiting, and they were doing you know, CEO town halls, and they were doing sales kickoffs, and they were doing learning development program, and they were doing all the structured stuff. But what they needed is to bring in some of the unstructured engagement more, and start to give the encouragement for these teams to actually kind of just to spend more time there. And now what we're seeing after we've done this is that teams are starting to see that value of, well, if I just have this turned on, if I have a team of 10 developers and we're all sitting around a conference room together, there's actually a lot of value in that, even though we're not, you know, we're not meeting all day, but that sense of presence without it being intrusive with a video conference, because some teams have done that. They put themselves on video conferencing, or at least turned off their video just so they can talk to each other and feel like they're in the same office. This is unobtrusive way to visualize each other, and then quickly be able to turn on a mic and say, and talk to your team of 10 people instantly, right? To get a quick answer like, hey, take a break, everybody, go and do, you know, walk around the block, you know, really lead in a new way of leading. So it's a really interesting way, but everybody's at this very beginning of this adoption curve, because to the point you were making, it's not intuitive, right? To think like, oh, if I become an avatar, I'm actually going to have better human relationships with each other. It's not intuitive at all when you think about it that way. But when you experience it and you start to think about the changes in cognitive biases and the way it makes it easier for different people of all walks of life. And then you think about, right, how do you do this at global scale, right? Is there a benefit to having the team in France and the team in New York and the team in Singapore and the team in India actually be able to socialize together, you know, during those hours that they're, you know, that there's actually overlap in all those different time zones? Like if you create happy hours and social hours and icebreakers, is there going to be a benefit from people knowing each other from different, you know, geographies, from different teams? And I think that answer is pretty obvious. You know, where innovation comes from is all these different diversity of perspective. Then you think about the equality, equal access to leadership, to each other. You know, one of the things that's a problem with organizations is it's just impossible to get access to management in a way that is not, you know, set up and structured or defined. So can you walk up to the leadership floor and knock on the virtual door and say hello to the CEO and drop in on office hours from anywhere around the world? And you can do that in this environment. You can actually create personal human-centric relationships at scale because of the accessibility of the platform from anywhere in the world that you have an internet connection, and the accessibility of the team itself.
Yeah. So Craig, when we listen to the first experiences of Verbilla, you know, from your clients, we hear large company who, for obvious reasons, financial reasons, it's more affordable to organize a meeting of, let's say, 400 people or 1,000 people on Verbilla than flying people around from anywhere to somewhere on this planet to meet in person. And so when you do the math, it's pretty straightforward, isn't it? You know, so the adoption may come from those large organizations who, for providing different experiences to their new employees or actual employees, are creating that space where people, you know, progressively will be in contact with it, and adoption may come from there eventually, more than small companies, for cost reasons. No, isn't it? I mean, this is what I understood you are seeing from your larger clients, and those events, huge events organized for them, by them, for employees or candidates.
Yeah, it's huge value. I think the key is this: the events business, the events company, the events team have been really challenged, right? Because it's super easy to do things on video conferencing, Zoom meetings, and bring 500 people in, and you can do it very relatively inexpensive there. So when it's compared to like doing things on video, it's like, oh, that's super inexpensive. But you don't get the same value, right, out of those types of meetings that you do in recreating an event in the space. So when folks and especially these corporate clients, they compare what an in-person like experience is to immersive. That's the apples to apples, so to speak. And so this DXC sales kickoff, they gave me a few numbers, but you can really guess what the numbers are, right? A 1,000-person sales kickoff in Europe. They told me that they usually spend $250,000 just on the event planner for that event, typically when it's in person, of course. Hotel costs, right? The hotel conference rooms, 1,000 people, 1,000 times 1,000. It's $1 million in general travel and hotel accommodations for 1,000 people, right? Just for 3 days that was, plus 250. So easily a $1 million to $2 million overhead. Our campus, our entry level campus deploy for the enterprise starts at $250,000 a year. And that's for a capacity of about 500. For a 1,000-person campus, it would start at around $400,000 a year. So you've got this one event for 1,000 people, right? That is, paid for a year's worth of access, and you can do that event now every day of the year because you have access 24/7 to this campus and have all this other value. But when I talk to CEOs, what I'm looking at is like, what's the most important part of your job, right? It is to create and understand a message for your team that inspires them, that drives the mission, the value. It's to connect to as many of those teams and employees as possible at a broader scale. So what's more important than creating a community where you can engage not only on a one-on-one basis, but at scale with thousands of your employees? The concept of a CEO town hall, where when I was at Verizon for a few years and Lowell McAdam was the CEO, we actually ran his town halls because we were the video streaming technology for him. And we'd set up production team, he'd meet up with our team or meet some team, and then we would stream it out to all the other locations for his town hall meetings. And that production team for sure cost a couple $100,000 just to have the people on the ground, the infrastructure on the ground to do that. But did it create the type of experience that is seeing 2,000 people in the auditorium? He saw 200 people in the room, and then he broadcast himself out to 180,000 employees. But if he can meet up with 2,000 people in an auditorium and be present there, right? And if he could do that every morning, right? The access to spending 30 minutes every morning with 2,000 of his employees, and that the personal connection he can make doing that across a 200,000 person team, it's mind-blowing to me. Like the impact that a single leader can have using this platform just by using it strategically, over the course of a year. And the impact of that is reduce travel expenses. Carbon footprint, of course, is a big reduction of those costs, and to do that for a few $100,000 is really a no-brainer. And we're actually sort of seeing it as a no-brainer, even though there's no metaverse budgets in these companies right now. They have to go find new budget, but they're finding it, and they're finding it because the impact of a single event is just is just obvious, because it hits, people come into the metaverse and they want to post about it. They're so excited, like my first time in the metaverse. And I was talking to people, and they're just blown away by not only being there, but sort of what happens, socially there.
Well, running out of time, Craig, but we'll see where it goes from large companies or small companies. Obviously, the pricing is, when you do the math, large companies will have some big advantages and benefits going to the metaverse very quickly. And we'll see for us, for growth resources, if we have larger clients asking to do our sessions and learning in a room on the metaverse, we'll do it. And we'll display our presentations, engage the discussion in a different way than what we have been doing through Zoom or in person. That will be a different experience, learning experience. So we have more to discuss here during our GenAI Summit. We have another meeting to continue this discussion and engage into a debate. And I want to thank you so much for everything we have learned about Virbela and the metaverse. There are many more questions. We couldn't ask those questions that are coming.
Yeah, I'm wondering,
yes,
just to cut in, Craig, if you wouldn't mind, I would love to get a 15 minutes with you after this to ask you the questions that people are really asking, to record that for them.
Yeah, so absolutely. We can do that. We can record. Yes. And so we're going to have a break now for those who can join. There's a different connection to Zoom.
All right.
So we can continue the discussion, or I will send it to you. And so we have to stay on the timing here for right. this event. So thank you so much, Craig, for again this discussion. Yes,
yeah. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm super excited always to introduce this topic to folks or to continue the conversation. I can't join the discussion right after. I'm right up at another meeting I have to be. But Susan, I'm happy to jump on another call and for you record my answers to the questions. Perfect. If you want to set it up later this week, happy to do that.
I will do that. Thank you so much.
And I'm jealous. Drink some good wine in Sonoma. For me, some duck horn or cake bread. I'll be jealous and thinking about that as you guys enjoy the rest of your event.
Thank you, Cap. Look forward to reconnect very soon. Thanks everyone for participation.
Thanks, Susan.
Okay, take care.